Okay, so you know how everyone's talking about Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's been huge.
Well, there's this software company you might have heard of.
Yeah, okay.
They made a name for themselves in business intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
but now they're basically all about Bitcoin.
Really?
Yeah, they've got like a mountain of it.
Wow.
So we're going deep on this company today. It's Strategy.
Strategy.
Yeah, they used to be called MicroStrategy, ticker MSTR.
Oh, right. MicroStrategy.
Exactly. And we're looking at all through the lens of value investing.
Interesting.
We've done a ton of research, and we want to cut through all the noise
Yeah,
and really understand what's going on with this company.
makes sense.
You know, their business, their management, their financials, the whole picture.
So kind of like a 360-degree view.
Exactly. And to kick things off, we're going to break down their business model.
Okay.
Then we'll take a good look at their management team,
Uh-huh.
and then we'll dive into their financial health.
Sounds good.
It's really fascinating because you have this company with a long history in software, right?
But then they make this huge bet on something completely different and super volatile.
Yeah, this big move into Bitcoin makes strategy way more speculative than your average software company.
Oh, for sure.
Bitcoin's price can swing wildly,
Definitely.
which means strategy's performance is now tied to these market swings that they can't really control.
That's a big risk.
It is.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder if all this focus on Bitcoin might actually hurt their original software business.
That's a good point.
It could be like they're putting too much emphasis on Bitcoin
Uh-huh.
and maybe neglecting the software side.
Yeah, they might not be putting enough resources into innovation and growth for their software.
Exactly. So let's talk about their software specifically.
Right.
What are they actually offering?
Well, their main product now seems to be Strategy One.
Strategy One.
Yeah, it's like an AI-powered analytics platform.
Interesting.
It's got all the bells and whistles like advanced data visualization, real-time analysis, AI-driven insights, mobile BI capabilities, strong security.
So they're really pushing the AI angle.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. AI is a big selling point these days. But they haven't forgotten about their older products either.
Like what?
Stuff like MicroStrategy Web and Hyperintelligence.
Oh, right. Those are like their core products back in the day.
Exactly, the foundation of their business.
And I think their rebranding is really telling.
What do you mean?
They went from MicroStrategy to just Strategy.
Yeah, and they got that new B logo.
Exactly. It's like they're shouting from the rooftops that they're all about Bitcoin now.
Yeah, no subtlety there.
So where do they stand in the market?
Well, they're still a known player in enterprise analytics and mobility software.
Okay.
But you can't ignore the fact that they're now the world's largest corporate holder of Bitcoin.
That's pretty crazy when you think about it.
It is, and their market cap is super tied to Bitcoin's price.
Yeah, that makes their valuation tricky.
It does. If you want to assess their software business, you really have to compare them to pure play analytics companies.
That's a really important point. So what are they actually offering to customers and investors?
That's a great question.
For businesses looking at their software, it seems like the pitch is all about using AI-powered analytics.
Yeah, to make smarter decisions.
Right. But for investors looking at their stock,
It's becoming more and more about getting exposure to Bitcoin.
exactly, their stock is basically a Bitcoin proxy now.
Pretty much. And the correlation between their stock price, MSTR, and Bitcoin's price proves it.
Okay, so to recap chapter 1,
Right?
Strategy's got this dual business model software and a Bitcoin treasury.
Uh-huh.
Software makes money the traditional way.
Licensing, subscriptions, and all that.
Exactly. And the Bitcoin side is all about hoping the price goes up.
Got it.
Now let's zoom out and look at the industries they're in.
Okay.
What are the big trends? Who are they competing with?
Well, the interesting thing is they're playing in two really hot markets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, enterprise analytics software is projecting here.
Wow. That's a lot.
There's just so much data out there.
Yeah.
And businesses really need help making sense of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then you have Bitcoin.
Which is also supposed to explode this year.
Oh, yeah. Lots of analysts are predicting huge growth for Bitcoin.
Why is that?
Well, you have more and more institutions getting involved,
Uh-huh.
and people are seeing it as a digital store of value.
Like digital gold.
Exactly. Some analysts are even saying Bitcoin could hit $150,000 or even $200,000 this year.
Wow. So both markets have serious potential.
Absolutely.
But what about the competition?
That's where things get interesting.
Okay.
In the analytics space, they're up against some heavy hitters.
Like who?
Companies like Tableau, Looker, Microsoft, Power BI. It's a tough crowd.
So lots of competition there.
Oh, yeah, it's a very competitive market.
And what about Bitcoin? How does competition work there?
It's different. They're not really competing directly with other companies making software.
Right.
It's more like they're competing with other companies that hold Bitcoin.
Oh, I see.
And with cryptocurrency mining operations and all the crypto platforms out there.
So it's more like a race to accumulate Bitcoin.
In a way, yeah.
And this is where strategies focus on Bitcoin could be a problem.
How so?
Well, by pouring so much into Bitcoin, they might be neglecting their software.
Right. They might not be keeping up with the innovation happening in the software space.
Exactly.
If they're not careful, they could lose their competitive edge.
That's a good point. What about the regulations they have to deal with?
Yeah, the regulatory landscape is getting more complicated for both software and Bitcoin.
In what way?
For analytic software, you have all these data privacy regulations,
Like what?
things like GDPR and CCPA, and then there's all the attention on AI.
Yeah, AI regulation is a big topic these days.
For sure. And for Bitcoin, well, governments around the world are starting to take it more seriously.
What are they doing?
They're pushing for more transparency, setting standards, and figuring out how to tax it.
Makes sense.
But in the U.S., things are still pretty unclear.
Oh, that's not good.
Not for a company like Strategy that's so heavily invested in Bitcoin.
Right, that uncertainty is a big risk for them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say someone wanted to enter these markets.
Right.
What kind of roadblocks would they face?
Well, for analytics software, the barriers to entry are pretty high.
Like what kind of barriers?
You need economies of scale. You need a really differentiated product.
Okay.
You need tons of money to invest. You need to figure out distribution.
Uh-huh.
And often you're dealing with customers that are already locked into other platforms.
Yeah, switching costs can be a big deal.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But cloud-based solutions have made things a bit easier for new players.
So it's not totally impossible.
Not impossible, but still tough.
And what about Bitcoin? What are the barriers there?
Well, Bitcoin has its own set of challenges.
Like what?
It can be hard to use and understand for new people.
Uh-huh.
The price is super volatile.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
And there are security concerns about digital assets in general.
Right. And then there's the regulatory uncertainty we just discussed.
Exactly. So while Bitcoin is more accessible in some ways, it's still not a walk in the park.
Okay, so how do all these barriers apply to strategy?
Good question.
They benefit from the high barriers in software.
Yeah, their software business is pretty well protected.
But Bitcoin's a different story.
Right. Almost any company could decide to buy a bunch of Bitcoin.
Yeah. It's not like they have a patent on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So their edge in Bitcoin isn't as strong as their edge in software.
And that could make them less attractive to investors who specifically want Bitcoin exposure.
That's a possibility.
Okay, so both industries have great potential.
For sure.
But for strategy, it all comes down to how these two parts of their business work together.
Or don't work together.
Right, it's a delicate balance. Now, let's talk about their competitive advantages.
All right, what makes them stand out?
Well, their brand is well known in the BI world.
From the MicroStrategy days.
Yeah, but their rebranding to strategy and their focus on Bitcoin creates this weird situation.
How so?
It might attract Bitcoin fans,
Uh-huh.
but it could also turn off traditional software investors.
Yeah, those investors might not like all the volatility. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a tough line to walk.
For sure.
What about cost advantages or economies of scale?
Well, they could potentially benefit from economies of scale in their software business.
Like in R&D and marketing.
Yeah, and if Bitcoin keeps going up?
Uh-huh. Their huge Bitcoin holdings could be seen as a cheap way to grow their capital.
Right, because they got in early.
But there's a big red flag here.
What's that?
Their return on invested capital, or ROIC.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's negative.
Negative ROIC is not a good sign.
It's not. It means they're not making enough money on the capital they've invested,
Especially when you consider their cost of capital.
which is like 30%.
Yeah, that's a big gap between their ROIC and their cost of capital.
It definitely raises questions about how efficiently they're using their money.
So a cost advantage isn't really an advantage right now.
Not really. What about network effects and switching costs?
Network effects aren't a big deal in enterprise software.
Okay.
But switching costs are huge for a platform like Strategy 1.
Why is that?
Because these systems are so deeply integrated into how businesses operate.
So once a company's using Strategy 1, it's hard for them to switch.
Exactly. Which is good for Strategy's software revenue.
It provides some stability.
Right.
What about any unique assets or capabilities they have?
Well, they were the first to go all in on Bitcoin.
And they're still the biggest corporate holder.
Right. That's definitely unique.
And they have decades of experience in BI and analytics.
Plus, they've developed this whole strategy for acquiring Bitcoin.
Using both debt and equity financing?
Right. So they've got this unique blend of a Bitcoin treasury, and a software business.
It's a strange mix.
It is, for sure.
Okay, so their big advantages are their Bitcoin stash and the stickiness of their software platform.
Makes sense.
Now let's talk about the people running the show.
Yeah, the management team.
Yeah. How do we evaluate them in a situation like this?
Well, we have to look at the track records of the key players.
Okay.
You've got Michael J. Saylor, the co-founder.
He was the CEO for a long time, right?
Yeah. And now he's the executive chairman.
Got it.
He built the BI business, and he's been the driving force behind the Bitcoin strategy.
Since 2020.
Right. And then you have Feng Lick.
He's the current CEO.
Yeah, he took over in 2022.
Okay.
He's known for doing a good job with the software financials back in 2021.
But Saylor's history isn't perfect, is it?
Well, there have been some issues.
Like what?
There was that SEC settlement in 2000 about inaccurate financial reporting.
Oh, right. I remember that.
And then more recently, there was the tax fraud settlement in 2024.
That was a big one,
Yeah.
$40 million.
Yeah, so there are definitely some red flags there.
So how do we balance those issues with his vision for Bitcoin?
It's a tough question.
It is. We have to weigh the good with the bad.
Exactly.
What about their ability to handle tough times?
Well, they've been through some rough patches before.
Like when?
Their stock tanked after the financial restatement in 2000, and they made it through the dot-com bubble.
Okay.
More recently, they've stuck to their Bitcoin guns even when the market's been crazy.
So they're not afraid of a little volatility.
Doesn't seem like it.
What about transparency? How do they communicate with investors?
They're pretty active on the investor relations front.
In what way?
They do regular earnings calls, they put out press releases,
Okay.
and they try to explain how their AI stuff works in Strategy 1.
So they're making an effort.
They are, but their Bitcoin strategy is so unusual.
And they're using these new metrics like Bitcoin yield.
Yeah, it's all very new and different.
So investors need to be extra careful.
Absolutely. They need to really scrutinize the information strategy is giving them.
Make sure it's clear, consistent, and complete.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about ethics.
Okay.
Those settlements involving Saylor are concerning.
Yeah, they raise some serious ethical questions.
And he's made some pretty out there statements about Bitcoin.
Right.
For value investors, ethics are a big deal.
Oh, yeah, it's a core principle.
You want to invest in companies run by honest people.
People with integrity who care about their shareholders.
So Saylor's actions and words definitely need to be considered.
Absolutely.
So is the management team honest, capable, and shareholder-oriented?
It's tough to say for sure.
They seem capable when it comes to the software business.
Yeah, but those ethical concerns are there.
And then you have this whole Bitcoin gamble, which is super risky.
Yeah, it's a big question mark.
Okay, let's move on to capital allocation.
All right, how are they using their money?
Well, they're still investing in their core software business.
Which is good.
Yeah, they're focusing on Strategy 1 and its AI features. And they do their big Strategy World Conference every year.
That's a big marketing expense.
It is. But a huge chunk of their money is going towards Bitcoin now.
So the balance is shifting.
It is. And that's
Okay.
something to watch carefully. Are they putting enough into software?
That's the key question.
What about mergers and acquisitions or buying back their own stock?
It doesn't seem like they're doing much M&A.
Okay.
They're more focused on organic growth and Bitcoin.
Makes sense.
They did some share buybacks a few years ago.
Between 2018 and 2020.
Yeah, but nothing lately.
Probably because they're issuing new shares to buy Bitcoin.
Right.
What about dividends?
They don't pay regular dividends on their common stock,
Okay.
but they do have this new series, a perpetual convertible preferred stock.
What's that all about?
It pays a fixed dividend 10% per year.
10%? That's pretty high.
It is, and here's the thing. They're using the money from this stock to buy more Bitcoin.
So it's like they're borrowing money to buy Bitcoin.
Kinda. Yeah.
And we talked about their ROIC earlier.
Which is not good.
Yeah, it's still negative.
What are the numbers?
For Q4 2024, it was 90.16% annualized.
Okay.
And for the trailing 12 months ending in March 2025,
Okay.
it was 90.36%.
Still negative.
Yep. And that's a major concern for value investors.
It means they're not getting enough bang for their buck.
Exactly, especially with their cost of capital at 30%.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
So are they using their money wisely to create shareholder value?
That's the million-dollar question, and the answer depends entirely on what happens with Bitcoin.
If Bitcoin goes up, they look like geniuses.
But if it goes down,
It could be a disaster.
and that preferred stock with its high dividend just adds another layer of complexity.
It's not a typical value investing situation.
Not at all.
Okay, let's shift gears and look at their overall financial health.
Sounds good.
What do the key metrics tell us?
Well, we'd need to check their current market cap for the latest number.
Okay.
Their PE ratio isn't really relevant right now
Why not?
because they're not making a profit,
Oh, right.
but their revenue trends are interesting.
How so?
Their total revenue has gone down.
Okay. But their subscription revenue from Strategy 1 has grown a lot.
Really? By how much?
Like 48% in Q4 and 32% for the whole year.
So people are buying into the subscription model?
It seems like it.
That could be a good sign for the long term.
It could mean more stable and predictable revenue.
What about their profit margins?
Their gross profit margin is decent, around 70%.
That's pretty healthy.
But their operating expenses are high because of these Bitcoin impairment losses.
Yeah, when Bitcoin's price drops, they have to write down the value of their holdings.
And that leads to big net losses.
Ouch.
What about their debt?
We know they've been using debt to buy Bitcoin.
Right.
Well, their debt-to-equity ratio is high.
How high?
Different sources say different things, but it's somewhere between 1.13 and 2.82.
Wow, so they're using a lot of leverage.
They are mostly through convertible debt
And that means their free cash flow is negative.
because they're spending so much on Bitcoin.
Exactly.
So are they profitable with a strong balance sheet?
Definitely not.
Not even close.
They're losing money and they have a ton of debt. Their
Yeah.
financial health is completely tied to Bitcoin.
It's a risky situation.
Very risky.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this first half.
We have
We've looked at their business, their management, their financials.
a good overview.
When we come back, we'll dive into market sentiment, ownership structure, and a full risk assessment.
Sounds good.
Stay with us.
Yeah, this is getting interesting. Okay, so we've talked about Strategy's business, their management, their financials.
The nuts and bolts.
Exactly.
Uh,
Now let's see what the market thinks about them.
okay, market sentiment.
Yeah. What are the analysts saying?
Well, most analysts seem pretty bullish on Strategy.
Really?
Yeah, they've got a strong buy rating from most analysts.
Wow, but I bet that's mostly because of Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Their stock price is basically tracking Bitcoin's price.
So if Bitcoin goes up,
Strategy stock goes
and
up.
vice versa.
Exactly. And any news about them buying more Bitcoin can really move the stock.
So it's a volatile ride.
Oh, yeah.
But we can't forget that analyst ratings are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. They're not the whole story.
Value investors need to do their own research.
Absolutely.
So the overall sentiment is basically driven by Bitcoin.
Pretty much.
If the Bitcoin hype fades away,
Strategist stock could take a hit.
okay, so market sentiment is Bitcoin-centric. What about ownership structure?
That's a bit trickier. We don't have all the details about institutional ownership and governance.
So we need to do more digging.
Yeah. But we do know that the CEO and executive chairman have both been selling shares recently.
Feng Lei and Michael Saylor.
Yeah, it's worth looking into why they're selling.
It could be a red flag.
It could be, but we need more information.
One interesting thing is that they separated the chairman and CEO roles back in 2022.
That's a notable governance change.
It might be a sign that they're trying to improve their corporate governance.
Hopefully.
Okay, let's do a full risk assessment.
All right, a SWOT analysis.
Perfect. So starting with strengths, what are they good at?
Well, they're the leading corporate holder of Bitcoin.
Yeah, nobody else comes close.
They've got their established Strategy 1 platform.
Which seems to be doing well.
They have an experienced management team.
Although we did talk about some ethical concerns.
Right, but they're definitely capable.
And they've shown they can raise capital.
Yeah, through debt, equity, you name it.
Plus, they have strong brand recognition in the BI world.
Even though it's evolving.
True. What about weaknesses?
Well, they're not profitable,
Yeah, they're losing money.
and they have a lot of debt.
Their debt-to-equity ratio is scary,
Their ROIC is negative.
which is not good,
They're completely dependent on Bitcoin's price.
which can swing wildly.
And then there are those ethical issues with the management,
Plus, their core software revenue is declining.
if you don't count subscriptions.
Right. So plenty of weaknesses to consider.
For sure.
What about opportunities?
Well, if Bitcoin keeps going up,
That's a big if.
it is, but if it does, Strategy will benefit enormously.
Right.
And the enterprise analytics market is growing.
So they could do well there, too.
They're also talking about generating Bitcoin yield.
We'll have to see how that plays out.
And more institutions are adopting Bitcoin.
So that could boost demand.
Yeah, but what about threats?
What could go wrong?
Well, what if Bitcoin crashes?
That's the biggest risk.
It is a huge price drop, would be devastating for Strategy.
And what if governments crack down on Bitcoin?
Yeah, regulation is a big threat.
They're facing intense competition in the software market.
They might not be able to keep up.
What if they can't handle their debt?
That's another scary thought.
And what if there are more ethical or legal problems with the management?
That would be a major blow to their credibility,
And they might have to issue more shares to buy Bitcoin.
which would dilute existing shareholders.
So the threats are just as significant as the opportunities.
Maybe even more so.
Okay, let's wrap things up.
Right.
Strategy is this strange mix of a software company and a Bitcoin treasury.
Two worlds colliding.
Exactly. And for traditional value investors, it's a tough case.
In what way?
They're not profitable. They have a
Yeah.
lot of debt. Their ROIC is negative. They're betting everything on Bitcoin.
And there are those ethical questions.
Right, so it's not your typical value stock.
But there is potential upside.
If Bitcoin goes to the moon,
And the software business could do well, too.
but it all comes down to Bitcoin.
It's a leveraged bet on Bitcoin.
So the potential rewards are huge.
But so are the risks.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not.
So does strategy fit with Warren Buffett's principles?
I don't think so.
He's all about investing in solid businesses.
Not speculating on volatile assets.
And he cares about ethics.
Yeah, strategy doesn't quite tick all those boxes.
So here's something to think about.
Okay.
Does strategy represent a new way for companies to manage their money?
Or is it just a crazy gamble?
What would it take for you to change your mind about this whole approach?
That's a good question.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into strategy.
It's been fascinating.
If you want more in-depth analysis like this,
Be sure to subscribe to the Stark Analytics AI YouTube channel.
and remember, this is just our research. It's not financial advice.
Definitely do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
And we used AI in our research process.
Just so you know.
And any stock suggestions in the comments are not endorsements.
We're just trying to spark a conversation.
So think for yourself and invest wisely.
That's the best advice we can give.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
And remember that question we posed.
About strategy's approach.
Is it a game changer or a disaster waiting to happen?
Keep thinking about it.
Because the line between innovation and risk is getting blurrier every day.
That's the world we live in.
Until next time.
Happy investing.